Hello, welcome to the Monday MetaCall. I'm your host, Katan TCG, or Pokedad Intern Drew, depending on which platform you're coming from. Welcome, we're going to be talking about some Pokemon stuff. First, let's take a look at the meta share changes. Not a whole lot, obviously. Mew's still the highest played deck. On the left, you'll be seeing everything that is current, and on the right is last week's meta share. Umbreon Urshifu still being very heavily played, seeing a lot of success, given that it has such heavy counters to the typings of most of the top attacking decks in the format, being the meta trio consisting of Psychic, Fighting, and Darkness. Third, Jolteon, still wildly consistent, still peppers and punishes a lot of those Inteleon spine decks, making it very hard to kind of control the board state. Now, yes, Sableye, very good. It's definitely moving up there, and it's considered a part of the other section, if you will, in terms of decks. Urshifu and Inteleon, still a great deck. Obviously, Mew's given it a lot of trouble, given them, swinging for Psychic, and they can come in with things like Meloetta and clean the board state. Yeah, Eternatus fell off. Weird. It just needs the right players. Other than that, Urshifu and Inteleon still super good. Very competitive deck. Gives you a lot of options. The Inteleon stays alive a little bit longer when you have things like fighting attackers, keeping Jolteon at bay. And then we're looking at 5th place, the mighty Duraludon. It's fantastic. Punishing decks for playing a lot of special energy, and obviously if you're looking at decks in the top 4, these are decks that definitely benefit from having access to things like special energy to keep them consistent and to obviously give them the power-ups that the special energy give them. Other consisting of things like the Hoopa and Baby Moltres and Sableye and the Hoopa V Genesect decks and stuff like that. So those decks are definitely being played still, but I think people are finally starting to catch on to the Duraludon. Calyrex and Inteleon, still easy deck to set up. The Melanie engine is, very much so prominent. No one hates drawing cards and accelerating energy at the same time, and then you still have options to hand attached to other things. So Calyrex and Inteleon doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. Zacian taking a little bit of a step back this week. I think just in terms of play, not necessarily in terms of competitiveness. It hasn't seen any wins outright this week. I know that a good player, Joshua Sutherland, definitely grinds this deck into the ground and makes it look incredibly competitive, because it is, especially the way that he plays it. But right now, it's just not seeing an incredible amount of success. Wildly consistent, but not wildly successful this week. Suicune Ludicolo stays right where it is, basically making up the same amount of meta share that it had last week. And Eternatus dropping all the way off of top 10. And Victini, because of Libui playing Fliptini all week long, seeing mild success. Being able to capitalize on things like Genesect is never a bad thing. And, if you end up having your evolution and your hand attachment, you donk everything. Going first with Victini is almost not a win. So basically, the first coin flip is the one that matters the most in decks like Fliptini. So without further ado, we're going to go right into the late night winner for last week and go over the previous call that we had before. All right, so the late night standings for last Monday, and this is kind of what I prepared you for, if you will, consisted of Mew and straight Suicune Inteleon in the first and second place, which is really cool because this Suicune deck is running heavy energy denial and things like Crushing Hammers and Fan of Waves, which does keep a lot of Mew and Rapid Strike and Single Strike decks at bay when you're obviously denying them energy. And most of those decks and archetypes are filling their benches with Pokemon only making Suicune a little bit stronger. So not relying so much on the Ludicolo, but keeping their opponent at a specific slower pace. Other than that, seeing 2 Duraludon in the top 4 is insane. It just means that a lot of Mew is played, a lot of Single Strike Urshifu is played, and these decks happen to capitalize on it. And Duraludon swings for a respectful 220, so being a wall deck that swings for high numbers is pretty intimidating to have in the format currently. And things like Flannery and Adventures Discovery have only given it more of a manipulative spine, being able to set up and get everything you need. it is funky that they have teched out things like Quick Ball and Metal Saucer, because it does evolve from the Champion's Path Metal Duraludon, but it just makes sense. You know, you are attaching 1 energy per turn. You can accelerate a little bit with things like Zacian. Other than that, Duraludon just seems to be wildly consistent without having to worry about getting rid of things in your hand, where instead you are literally intrepid sorting into everything that is necessary to make the deck go forward. After that, you do have your Urshifu and Teleon, another Mew, Urshifu and Teleon, another Mew, and so on and so forth. The pattern continues. That's just how the meta shakes out. And we're going to look at last night's Sunday Open results. Mew. It's Mew. It's Mew, it's Mew, it's Mew. And what's making these decks separate from each other is some lists are teching in things like the Latias, and some things are teching in a little bit more special basic energy to compensate for the Duraludon that has been peppering the meta. However, you're not seeing a lot of Duraludon in the top cut in this, and it's because of those specific techs that they are coming through with. Urshifu and Teleon still taking a top cut spot, not seeing success against something that swings for Psychic in 50% of the cards that it's that has in it. So, you know, that's, you take your losses there. It is not a list that consists of something like Moltres or like a sneaky Sableye or a Baby Hoopa to help it kind of combat that weakness. Uses Ultra Consistency to kind of just stay the course. Umbreon, Urshifu seeing success. Jolteon and Teleon seeing a lot of success. But without further ado, we'll kind of go look at the Sunday Open winning list in the form of another Mew deck that we're all very excited about. Zoom in a little bit here. As you can see, pretty consistent. Things like Escape Rope have made an appearance in Mew decks, and it's not a bad call, given that having Genesect stuck in the active is a strategy for most Mew decks right now, or most people playing against Mew decks. So it's kind of useful, and it's also another item that can be used to use with Cramomatic, the favorite card of a specific Pokedad not named Rick. But yeah, it's got a lot of tech to it to make it useful against other cards, other decks in the meta that have been giving Mew a slight amount of trouble. The one of Tool Jammer is very questionable for me, but I do understand it, because if you're denying another Mew deck their a Vitality Band, it ruins a lot of math that they're trying to make up. Obviously playing the Mew consistent cards in the form of Power Tablet, the multiple stadiums to counteract each other, the high count of Elsa Sparkle and Fusion Strike Energy to kind of generate that turn 1 Meloetta play, if you will. So other than that, very competitive deck. It becomes very autopilot at some point when you make it super duper consistent like this. It does run the low count of Rotom Phone, which means a lot of the things on the surface must be ultra playable, like an all or nothing deck, if you will. So this is your winning list from the Sunday Open. Take away with it from it what you will. And if this is your list and you won the Sunday Open, shout out in the chat. I want to hear it. I want to give you a good old digital high five, if you will. And we're going to go look at last week's late night results Mew deck. Very similar, lower count of Escape Rope. You're seeing things like Fog Crystal, the Vitality Band, which is what the Tool Jammer is counteracting in the previous one, a level count of Boss to Elsa Sparkle. Things like this where you're streamlining, trying to get that turn 1 Sparkle, are very useful in the format. However, it's not incredibly necessary. It plays 3 Switch and 1 Rope, where the 2-2 balance seems kind of necessary with all these Genesect getting stuck in the active. Playing the Old Cemetery is also a good math fixer too, helping get a lot of decks below that 320, 330 HP line, making it easier for you to use less Power Tablets to take knockouts on things that aren't weak to Psychic decks. And I think, without going into too much extravagant detail, I think both of these lists are very consistent, very competitive. Mew Genesect is just very autopilot of a deck. It does take quite a bit of back and forth to make them operate efficiently, but I think it's catered to the player in terms of the list. The Evolution Incense being a favorite for most people who don't want to like miss the Mew VMAX. There is plenty of Pokemon search in terms of Great Ball, Quick Ball, Fog Crystal. So this is kind of the weird one of that I have that sticks out to me like a sore thumb. And I think my number one call is going to be Mew. And I think in terms of tech, you can be as consistent as you want. You can be as consistent as you want, but I think if you're really trying to deny other players when it comes to math, this Oricorio is actually a really big deal. And a lot of people will say, couple less damage isn't really going to make a huge difference. It's not going to stave off any one hit knockouts, but it will help you in terms of things like bench sniping that are very prevalent in the format. And I know that things like things like Urshifu, getting the Melanie engine, being able to back rapid flow. You have things like Hoopa. You have things like your quick shooting and telling on that people are actually attacking with, and so on and so forth. Things like Jolteon too, and I know Genesect is a prime target for these Jolteon decks. So Oricorio is huge. It's a great math fixer. I would like to see a Crystal Cave in this deck. I have run into instances where you're peppering things like Genesect to take those future knockouts, and the Crystal Cave really sets you back a couple turns. So other than that, this would be my number one call. Everything in this list is wildly consistent. You've got plenty of items to get rid of with Cramomatics. That way you can streamline the things that you want. And currently, I think that this would be ultra competitive. Now, I know last night's Sunday Open didn't consist of a lot of Duraludon, and I don't think it's because the right list wasn't being played. I think it's just because it was seeing a lot of decks like Shadow Rider Calyrex that did make it into top 16 that don't have to tech in any special energy to be good. But I think it would be useful to have a deck like this. If I were to go play in the late night series tonight, this would be the deck that I play. Doesn't have a lot of aggro tech. It doesn't have anything that makes it stand out amongst the rest, but this is the deck that I would go play and try to at least stave off a lot of these the issues that people are running into with these special energy accelerating Mew decks. Now, Duraludon V not super strong, but does 220. 220 is really good when you're fighting against things like Mew that have absolutely no healing, very little hand manipulation, and if you could just get rid of things like Genesect with Avery, which you run a 3 count of, it's going to be incredibly manipulative to those decks. Not only are they not able to use things like their special energy, but they're not able to have the efficient draw power that Genesect creates for them, and there is absolutely no Pokemon recall in those decks whatsoever. So to counter the deck that saw, the first, second, third, and fourth place wins in those tournaments, might as well play a hard counter to it. I like the 2 Raihan. I think being able to accelerate, especially with these energies, the fighting energy, re-accelerate it and then get back into an attacking position is very useful. Flannery basically gives you the 5th stadium denial, so things like Path to the Peak from Jolteon and maybe an Urshifu tech, if you will, are going to be prominent. You might as well be able to counter stadiums 5 times. The Team Yell Towel is funny because if you do hit for that 220 mark, if you hit for it again, you might as well heal yourself. Pop the Crystal Cave as well, which is only healing you. And then you're going to be swinging into Pokemon V or Pokemon V Max that you've already hit for 220 for a massive amount of damage. Now, the 1 Tool Scrapper is useful against things like Suicune. You can one-hit KO Suicunes all day, but they're so nimble, they're so quick, there's so many switching cards. Tool Scrapper is going to be useful to get rid of things like balloons and those silly capes. The Big Charm, obviously, you have a massive amount of HP at 330, might as well make it 360. And Crushing Hammer, getting rid of regular energies, that way they only have special energy across the board, is huge. And that's my take on the meta. And I think that playing either this Duraludon deck or this Mew deck, you will see success and you might see a tournament win. Let us know if something like that happens to you, and deuces.